So in chapter 4, an army that had defeated and oppressed them for 20 years. God's like, go fight them. You're like, we've been trying. We've lost every time for 20 years. And they have 900 iron chariots. That's like tanks. So you got like Jewish farmers with sticks up against soldiers with tanks. God's like, here's the battle plan. The Holy Spirit gives it through Deborah in chapter 4. When you draw them out, draw them down to the valley alongside of the river. Here it's called Kishon. That's the river. You're like, that's a weird place. From a military strategy perspective, being at the bottom of a cliff in a valley, true or false, that is not a secure position from which to fight. If you're fighting, you want to be in the high position, not the low position, and you want to have freedom. You don't want to be trapped against a mountain or a cliff or a wall. God's like, trust me. Like, this doesn't make any sense. So they obey the Lord. They're in the valley alongside of the river, and guess what God says? Guess what God says? It tells us right here. This is a little insight. God said, I sent rain. They live in the desert. Lots of rain. Monsoon season. Guess what happens to the river? It floods. Guess what happens to all the water? It floods that valley. And it drowns many of the soldiers. And it creates so much mud that their chariots no longer can travel. They're literally stuck in the mud. The soldiers then have to get out of their chariots for hand-to-hand combat, and they all get slaughtered. This just proves God hates two-wheel drive. Okay? See? So you didn't see that coming. The reason they all died, they drove two-wheel drive chariots. That was their problem. See, this is how you can tell God's people and the other people. God's men drive four-wheel drive. Four-wheel drive. So let me do a little healing here. For you women that are here and you're like, I told my husband, be worried about gas mileage, and I made him get a two-wheel drive. On the way home, you still give me, say, hon, I heard from the Lord. Lord spoke to me in Mark's sermon. My big takeaway was, we need to get you a four-wheel drive. You don't want to be two-wheel drive like the Canaanites. Get stuck in the mud and die. So I would recommend all of God's men drive a four-wheel drive. And so I've had a lot of trucks, lifted trucks, four-wheel drive, Chevys. I've had FJ Cruiser, old school Land Cruiser. I had a couple Jeeps, a Durango. I had as well the Cherokee. And then I had a couple of Jeep Wranglers. I had a two-door. There was a manual, and then I got a four-door that I kept breaking. And now I'm driving a first edition Ford Bronco, okay? For two reasons. That's what Jesus drives. The whole bracelet, like, what would Jesus drive? WWJD. And so if you read Revelation, it says when Jesus returns, he'll come back on a white horse Bronco. It's probably an old school, redone, white vintage Bronco, I think with the white rims. And some people have asked me, how is the Bronco like a Jeep? And I just tell them, I said, well, it's good for off-road. It's fun. I just had it up in the snow in the mountains yesterday. I said, a Bronco is kind of like a Jeep, but for men. So, okay. All right. See, you like the heavy metal stuff, and you Jeep guys are like, no. It's underpowered, doesn't have enough speeds in the transmission. And so I'll be honest with you, I broke my Jeep over and over. I obliterated the front end. I went through 3 or 4 cams in it, and I'm not kidding you, I Baja jumped it, I broke the entire front end, I'll just tell you the truth. And it was so broken, I couldn't take a right turn, I could only take a left. Moral of the story is, you know it's broken when it only goes left, okay? Anyways, so, all right.
Howdy, Pastor Mark here. Thanks for viewing the clip. And if you'd like the entire sermon, we've got it ready to go.